All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Mo You Know. I am Monique Quiggley, your host of today's show. And today I am honored to have the privilege to interview Mr. James McLynas. He is one of our candidates for Pinellas County Sheriff for 2020. Thank you for your time and thank you for joining us, James.
Thank you, Monique. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. Awesome. So before we jump right in and start this interview, I want to tell you all a little bit about why I'm doing this and the format that we have for the Mo You Know show and interviews. This is all about knowledge transfer. I have to do my research anyways on the candidates that I'm going to vote for. So I thought it would be really cool to, as I'm doing my research, do an interview and show you and share those experiences with all of you all. So I hope that you will all appreciate this and you will engage and make informed decisions and go out and vote. With that being said, this isn't just about Monique interviewing Mr. McLynas and learning about him. I want you guys to get involved and be interactive and engaged. And towards the end, after Mr. McLynas and I have some time together, I want you guys to post your questions for Mr. McLynas, and we're going to answer some of those questions live on this broadcast. So please, if you have questions, feel free towards the end to put them in the comments section. And in that comments section, we're going to go in and then we're going to look and we're going to select some of those questions in specific for Mr. McLynas to kind of further unpack for all of you all. So without further ado, again, we don't want to waste any time. We have a lot to talk about. James, please introduce yourself to the world. Tell us a little bit, introduce yourself to the world. Tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, and some of your background, please.
All right, well, my name is James McLynas. I'm running for Sheriff of Pinellas County. I also ran in 2016, campaigned for about 3 months, and obtained over 100,000 votes here in Pinellas County. I was told I set the NPA non-party affiliate record for the state of Florida. In 2020, I'm back running again. This time, I'm taking it a heck of a lot more seriously than I did last time. I've been campaigning basically for the last 4 years. And my background is basically consumer protection. I opened a couple of businesses. I haven't worked for anybody else since 1984. And I don't think I could ever work for anybody else again. So when I got into the businesses that I was in, most of them had a consumer protection slant to them. I was dealing with complicated insurance issues, insurance claims, insurance companies ripping off their consumers, and that was where I stepped in and had my companies operating. I used to teach continuing education to attorneys in those areas as well. So I'm very well versed in looking over very complicated contract law, legalese, and I can understand it very easily and I can see where the issues are. And when I came down to the St. Pete area in 2009, I ran into a little bit of trouble with the Pinellas County Sheriff's Department and the Clearwater Police Department. And my general nature is to start investigating when things don't seem right. And I was able to find multiple issues with these police officers, both the Clearwater and the Pinellas County Sheriff's Department. And I started filing complaints against them with both Chief Holloway and Sheriff Galtieri. And instead of these officers getting into any kind of trouble or stopping what they were doing, both Holloway and Galtieri seemed to circle the wagons, denied that there was anything wrong. They investigated themselves, of course, and found nobody was doing anything wrong. And so then I went to the media with the information, and a lot of these stories were published, and then the media put pressure on them to actually get rid of these officers. I was able to get Lieutenant Richard Crean removed from the Clearwater Police Department. I was able to expose Sean Pappas, the racist trainer that Sheriff Galtieri personally appointed to train new recruits. I was able to expose in the media and force Galtieri to terminate Deputy Paul Martin, he had 33 complaints of just about everything you could possibly imagine. And Galtieri covered for him for a decade.
Oh, so wow.
When I went through all that, I was so sick and tired of both of them, Holloway and Galtieri, covering up for these dirty cops, that I told Sheriff Galtieri in an email that I was going to run for sheriff against him to expose his corruption in the 2016 election. And his response was to have my 9-year-old daughter arrested in handcuffs. A little while later, he had her Baker acted, or participated in her Baker acting, I should say. And then he filed 4 false felony charges against me. He used a Stingray tracking device illegally without a warrant and then lied that he used it. His lawyers lied, the PCSO lied, they lied that they had documents. He then used that so he could track me down and have me arrested the day before my final custody hearing so I would lose my daughter. They also filed multiple false child protective investigation reports against me, and they redacted and tampered with those reports before they gave them to the court. But fortunately, I'd done my homework. I know what I'm doing in the area of legalese. I represented myself in these cases. I was able to get rid of all of the criminal charges that he falsely filed. I was able to prove that his deputies lied on the reports. I was able to prove that they perjured themselves in depositions. I got the charges all dismissed. And then I was also able to get 100% of my custody of my daughter in this situation. So everything finally worked out right. But then I'm faced with a situation where I live in a community where I have a sheriff that is so despicable and so dirty that he will actually have his political opponent falsely accused, charged, and arrested. And I can't live in a society like that. And I hope nobody else would. And just like I stuck up for the people that I was helping with their insurance claims, I feel like now that I'm sticking up for everyone here in Pinellas County to move forward and try and remove this corruption and this person, Sheriff Galtieri, that in my opinion is a cancer on the people of Pinellas.
Okay. Wow. You do have an extensive background. And I tell you, just from a little bit about what you've told me, you definitely have a history of fighting to protect people, make sure that they understand exactly what's going on. Very, very tenacious for sure. You don't give up and give in. And in addition to that, you're passionate. So as we further understand who James McLynas is, and in regards to how you will be the best or are the best candidate for sheriff for Pinellas County 2020, what are some of the reasons you are specifically running this year for sheriff?
Well, besides everything I just mentioned, I've also spent the last 10 years investigating the Pinellas County Sheriff's Department. Basically, I know where the bodies are. I know where the corruption is. I know what's wrong with the agency. In fact, I'd be probably the person not working at the sheriff's agency that knows more about their corruption than anybody else in Pinellas County. And at the same time, I've not only been researching what they've been doing, I've been researching what other entities, other police agencies, and what other countries have been doing to eliminate the exact same problems that we have. So I think that as a candidate for sheriff, I'm in the very unique position of knowing exactly what's wrong with the Pinellas County Sheriff's Department and exactly how to fix it. And that's why I've put every single thing that I'm going to do on my webpage, McLynas4Sheriff.com, so that people can read my platforms and they can go out there and see exactly what I'm going to do, exactly how I'm going to do it, and exactly why I'm going to do it. And I hope at the end of my 4 years with the sheriff's office that I'll be able to have an agency here that has honorable and ethical officers, that we don't have anybody getting killed on the streets. We're not going to be abusing the arrest policies here anymore, putting people in jail for minor offenses. I'm going to end cannabis enforcement and all the arrests and all the criminalization that comes with that. I'm going to end mass incarceration at the source, where they put the handcuffs on the people at the sheriff's office. And I think that I can create an environment here where the people of Pinellas actually trust their officers, because we're here to help, not here to victimize, which is the way it's been for the last 10 years.
Okay, awesome. It sounds like you have a solid plan and you've been working on this plan for quite some time now. I think you have done a great job of explaining some of the corruption with some tangible examples that you've witnessed and how you would like to take some of those out. What I'd like to kind of go through here in specific is some of the changes that you would like to make that are different than what your opponents would do. So I understand we've talked about corruption, but how do you plan to implement or make some of these changes come to fruition differently than what your opponents have said that they're going to do or that they've done in the past?
Well, Sheriff Galtieri hasn't said he's going to do anything, so I'm going to be a lot different than him. And as far as Mr. Santana goes, he has a couple of basic generic ideas, little token measures that he's talked about, but I haven't seen any real plans. And from my perspective, I'm going to go in there and literally start the agency from the top to the bottom and rip the whole place apart and start over. I'm going to keep everything that's working and get rid of everything that's not. And what I mean by that is, it's my opinion that most police agencies across the country have about a 30-30 split, or 30%, 30%, whatever, third split of officers. The first third of the officers are corrupt. They like to beat people up. They like to harass people, like that one we just saw in Miami punch that black woman in the face at the airport. You have officers like that in every single agency, and they tend to represent about a third of any agency.
How do you identify them? Sorry to interrupt, how do you identify them?
Oh, I'll get to that.
Okay. All right. Sorry. Go ahead.
Right. So then at the other end of the spectrum, you've got the good police officers, the guys that really want to do the right thing for the public. They got in the job for the right reasons. They're helpful, they're kind, they're courteous, they're respectful, but they are the people that are attacked by the agency. Those people, if they open up their mouths and complain, they're ostracized and run out of the industry, and they never wind up getting themselves promoted. So the bad ones tend to be in control. And then you've got the middle people, the middle third, and that middle third is basically going to go either way, whichever they're paired with. If they're paired with a corrupt officer, they're going to be corrupt. If they're paired with a good officer, they're going to be a good officer that day. And so my job is to find those thirds of the bad officers, get rid of them, promote the good third, and hopefully we can save the middle third. And you ask how I'm going to find those officers. Well, I already have a list of several that I'm going to be getting rid of as soon as I get there. But I'm going to start by firing, terminating, and getting rid of the officers with the 50 highest number of complaints. The next ones I'm going to do are the next 100 officers with complaints. Now, each one of those I'll go over more carefully, but the 50 with the highest number of complaints, they're gone. They're history. Okay. I'm then going to go in and I'm going to remove all the double dippers. Double dippers are officers that they pulled a scam on the taxpayers. Basically, what they did is they did their 20 or 25 years. They retired, and Galtieri arranged it with them so they would go ahead and retire. And then after less than a year or about a year, then they come back intentionally, and Galtieri rehires them so that they can collect both a pension and a paycheck intentionally. And we have deputies at the Pinellas County Sheriff's Department, like Deputy George Stefan, as an example, and Dan Stephan and George, I can't remember the other guy's name, but these guys collect over $255,000 a year out of taxpayers' pockets. Both of those collected a $550,000 drop check for leaving, so to make room for people to come up the chain of command, gives people space and allow people that are good officers to stay there because there's someplace for them to go, not filled up positions at the top. And so these particular officers got the $550,000 plus their $250,000 a year. They've collected over $1.3 million worth of compensation in just the last 3 years. And I think it's repugnant to the people of Pinellas that we have deputies, that public servants, that we're making millionaires in less than 4 years. And you have a person like Sheriff Galtieri who's doing this on purpose so that these higher ranking officers won't run against him so he can preserve his career. It's all just a big scam on the people. So there are so many different ways that I'm going to dig these guys out, find them, and get rid of them. We're going to be doing drug testing. We're going to be doing psychological evaluations on all officers. Basically, they have to fill out a psych exam when they first start, and then that's it. They can be there for 20 years, never again. They talk about all the trauma that they go through and how hard their job is and how it hardens them. Well, shouldn't we be examining them as these things go along, as they have 5 or 8 or 10 years on the force? Shouldn't we be rechecking them, re-examining them to see if there's an issue cropping up? So we're going to be doing routine and regular both drug testing and psychological evaluations. And then another thing I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be starting a website where everyone here in Pinellas can actually rate their officers. Our officers are going to be on the website. So if you've had an encounter with one, you can actually go out there, find him, and leave him a 0 to 5-star rating and explain the interaction that you had. And hopefully what I'm going to be able to do is look at that, because I'm going to have a lot of focus on that, because if these people are being rejected by the community, then I don't want them in that position. So if I look and I see that he's got a 2.3, 2.5 star rating, and he's got 45 negative reviews, I'm going to be bringing that guy in, and we're going to be talking about getting rid of him. While at the other hand, if we've got a guy that's got 50 or 60 positive reviews and he's got 4.8 reviews, and he looks like a good guy and the community is responding favorably to him, I'm going to look at maybe promoting him and putting him in a position of authority where he can train other people to be like he is. So we'll have, not only will we be able to do that from our perspective, but the community will actually be able to look at it too. So if you want to see how our officers are doing, go out on the website and look. They'll be ranked from however many we have, from the best to the worst. And then you can put pressure on me to say, hey, why is this one still here when he's only a 2.1 star? And we're going to get rid of him. So there's a lot of different things we can do in that regard.
Wow, that's an innovative approach to kind of get your community involved in giving feedback, and then you being able to take some tangible action on that feedback. So I've heard a plethora of things, and I'm so impressed with how prepared you are. And what I'd like to say is some of those things sound like, there's a lot of money going out to certain individuals in a manner that's should not be approved, and it's not appropriate. So, and we've heard a lot of talk about defunding the police. So with that, what are your thoughts around defunding the police? And is it a reallocation of the funds, et cetera? I just want to hear, when we hear that in the media, where James McLynas stands on that topic.
Well, that one's pretty easy. Just my simple stance of ending cannabis enforcement. According to Sheriff Galtieri, I listened to him personally speak in front of the Pinellas County Trial Lawyers Association. And he's told these trial lawyers that, and this is how he said it, approximately 35% of our business is cannabis arrests. And he called it business. And that's the way it really is for him. He thought he could speak openly among these lawyers. He didn't know I was sitting in the back row. And so if 35% is what is cannabis enforcement, well, if I end cannabis enforcement literally across the board, no more cannabis enforcement at all, no more arresting people, searching their cars, searching their homes, not doing anything in regard to cannabis from this point forward, then that's a third of the budget. That's over $100 million being saved just from that alone. And if I go ahead and get rid of the double dippers and all the other things I know about that are wasting money, like Sheriff Galtieri's $1.5 billion plane. Why do we have 3 helicopters with $40,000 custom paint jobs on them? Why do we have a $350,000 cold drink machine that the sheriff parked out in Indian Rock Shores just so deputies, that the 300 deputies he had on the beach, could have cold drinks? I mean, the spending is absolutely ridiculous at the sheriff's department. Just look at the brand new sheriff's building, the new $100 million jail, the new court systems. All of this is what I call the Pinellas County punishment machine. And the Pinellas County punishment machine is all of the police agencies operating here in Pinellas County. We don't need them all. We don't need all these officers. We don't need to have them over-policing and criminalizing everything that we do. Another example is Sheriff Galtieri himself, when COVID hit, he specifically said that he had to cut down on the people that he was arresting in the jail. And if you look at the Tampa Times, they did a story on this, and he said that we're going to now, he sent out an email to all the rest of the police agencies. He said he wants them to all now use their best judgment and discretion so that we don't bring so many people into the jail and arrest them. Well, if he's now asking them all to use their best judgment, what the hell were they using for the last 10 years? And so he said that we typically average about 130 to 140 arrests a day. And he says we've now been able to get those down to about 30 arrests a day. And we're doing that by using NTAs, or notice to appear. He then went on to say that a notice to appear carries the same weight and consequence as an arrest, just but without the jail stay. So if he's arresting over 100 people a day and he's putting them in jail when an NTA or notice to appear could have been used instead, if you do 100 people a day times 365 days a year, that's 36,500 people that Sheriff Galtieri puts in jail every single year. Now, it costs about $125 per day to house those inmates. So that's over $4 million just arresting people that don't need to be arrested at all. I just put a video out on my webpage today showing the 60 vans that they have to go collect prisoners here in Pinellas County. That's insane. So since Sheriff Galtieri's been in office, if you add up just those arrests from the time he's been in office, that's over $40 million wasted on arresting and criminalizing people that never should have been arrested in the first place. We didn't need that new $100 million jail. Galtieri just built it to fill it. And that's what we have here. We've got a business where he's cashing in on these prisoners and taking money and a cancer on the society of this kind of county. And every one of these people that he arrests and criminalizes now has an arrest record, not a conviction record, an arrest record. And when you're arrested, you can't get the job. You can't get the apartment. You can't do a lot of things in society because you're now criminalized. And that's what he's been doing to so many people here in Pinellas, and that has got to stop.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Wow. You are very, very well informed and prepared. I can tell that you've done a lot of research, and I feel the passion that's coming from you. I'm impressed.
Well, thank you. You just
Absolutely.
look at this stuff and you can't help but be disgusted by it. Just since Sheriff Galtieri has been in office, he has spent $2.3 billion of our money, taxpayers' money. And for what? What have we gotten for that? 370,000 arrests that we didn't need, a $100 million jail that we don't need, that is now a coronavirus factory that he's trying to push people in and out of that are infected and then put them back into the community. The whole thing is insanity, and it needs to be changed from the top to the bottom.
Right. Right. Absolutely. So in regards to defunding the police, it sounds like there's areas that you've already identified that we can take money away and reinvest in areas that is important, such as psych evals, such as making sure that we are putting up websites that matter and managing those so that we can have the best in class type of service. one thing we haven't talked about, and I haven't heard any feedback around an investment and policy around, is body cameras. So what's your stance around body cams?
But we had a little halfway debate, a fake debate, because Galtieri refused to actually participate in it. And he said that he's not going to do body cameras because that's $14 million. Well, that's 4% of the budget. He can go out and buy himself a 10-passenger private airplane. What sheriff needs a 10-passenger airplane when he's a county sheriff? All of his business is in this county. The only reason he would need that plane is if he's flying outside for his own personal business or his own career. Bottom line is, we didn't need that. But he can buy himself his own plane, but we can't have body cameras. So no, absolutely, body cameras are going to be a must. They're going to be something I'm going to be implementing immediately. Be damned the cost. I mean, I have my own body camera. I've got a front and rear facing dash camera in my car. That was $200. My body camera was $125. If regular citizens can have these, certainly the police can.
Okay, awesome. Great. I'm seeing a lot of great comments come in. So at this point, I'm going to ask that anyone that is viewing this broadcast, please start to put in any of your questions for Mr. McLynas so that we can further dive into some things that we want to know about Mr. McLynas. So I agree. I'm glad that around the body cameras, you are willing to make them mandatory. And I'm thinking that, and I'm going to ask you this, around enforcement, you will have an enforcement policy and not really care about the feedback or the flack or the complaints you get from the deputies for having to wear them, right?
No, and that's where I come in as a non-law enforcement officer. I'm not a police officer. I'm not beholden to the thin blue line of silence. I haven't been raised my entire time within the agency to learn to shut my mouth when bad things are happening, or otherwise I'm going to get in trouble. I don't care. And the bottom line is, to hold these officers accountable, you have to go in and change so many things. I'm not going to negotiate with the unions and give them the nonsense that they have in there. Sheriff Galtieri actually signed a union contract with the union here, and it says that he can't fire an officer without them being allowed to arbitrate the firing. Now, the real asinine part of it is Galtieri signed away the right to the union to pick the arbitrator. So the union gets to actually pick the judge. And guess who they're going to pick? They're going to pick someone who's going to reinstate the bad officer. And where did we wind up getting with all that? So I'm not going to negotiate with the unions. I'm not going to put these nonsensical things in the contract. I'm going to change the use of force reforms, because that's where the real problem lies. If you have a use of force reform that says that all the officer has to do is be afraid to kill somebody, which is that reasonable term, it needs to be taken out and put back to necessary, required force, only up to the required force. And if you close all those little loopholes they've been squeezing through, then when there's an investigation internally, I will come to the conclusion that the use of force was not within policy. Now that the use of force is not within policy, now the officer can be terminated. Now the officer, I can yank his credentials. Now he can be sued by the person who he abused. So they have all these little protections, like the Police Officers Bill of Rights that's codified in Florida statute, and all these things that are designed to help these officers get away with what they've done. And that's all going to end when I'm sheriff. Okay.
All right. I do have a couple of questions that have come in. That was an excellent answer. So we have Hassaj has a question. Will you allow your deputies to arrest at will without weighing any evidence and having them tell you your story to the judge and slap cuffs on you? I think you kind of addressed a little bit of that a little bit earlier when we were talking about, they need to appear. But could you tell us a little bit more about this?
Yeah, well, Sheriff Galtieri is still harassing all these people for minor offenses, things like cannabis and open container and a minor driver's license nonsenses. So yeah, he may not be arresting him now, but I've watched his arrest numbers go back up, and he's quietly back to arresting over 100 people a day again. Be damned if he's got a COVID infection. So from my perspective, I'm going to stop all those petty arrests. I don't believe that a crime has been committed if there's not a victim. Right now, currently, Sheriff Galtieri allows about 80% of the crimes that are reported to him to go unsolved. And the reason he's doing that is because I can't drive up and down Gulf Boulevard without seeing 8 or 10 cops sitting in the parking lots, twiddling their thumbs and sleeping. I've actually caught them on video sleeping. So he's not investigating the actual crimes. He's not holding criminals accountable. He's basically going for the low-hanging fruit and arresting everyone for small, minor offenses, and that ends with me. All those people that would have gotten an NTA, most of them aren't going to get anything with me. They're going to get a please go home. If someone's walking down the street and they're drunk, you know what they used to do in the old days? They used to give them a ride home.
Yeah.
Now we criminalize people for everything, and that's going to stop with me. I'm going to drastically reduce the arrests that are made here in Pinellas County.
I have a question. Is there incentive for the deputies and police officers on the amount of arrests or tickets that they give out? Is there an incentive for them in place? And if so, would you get rid of that?
Actually, quotas are illegal, and
Okay.
they have been struck down by the federal government and the United States Supreme
Okay.
Court.
Good.
However, Sheriff Galtieri has something he calls a performance review.
I
So
thought
it's
so.
technically not a quota, it's a performance review. And
Okay.
officers are directly expected to do a certain amount of arrests, a certain amount of citations, and a certain number of FIRs. Are you familiar with what an FIR is?
Tell me a little bit about it.
An FIR is what they call a field interview report. And these deputies are instructed to do a certain number of FIRs per shift. And what an FIR is, they just stop someone who hasn't violated any law, hasn't broken any law, hasn't committed any crime, and they get out of their car, they walk up to them and they start interviewing them. Where are you going? What are you doing? Where are you on your way? What you got in your pockets? Hey, turn around. You mind if I check you for anything? And basically what they're trying to do is find someone that they can pin a charge on and arrest. And that's what they used to call stop and frisk. Here they call them FIRs. And having the deputies go out and literally prey on the community like that is why the community can't stand them. It's why the community looks at them and says, oh, here they come again. They're just going to harass me again. And all that stuff is going to end. I'm going to end the pretextual stops where they see someone they don't like and they pull them over and they make up a reason to stop them. Next thing you know, they're making up a reason to get in their car and search the vehicle. All that stuff is going to come to an end with me because that is violations of the United States Constitution. And as a constitutional sheriff, I'm going to swear an oath not only to the Constitution, but to the people of Pinellas County that I will uphold the Constitution. And those kinds of ridiculous, frivolous, nonsensical stops are going to end with me.
Okay. Awesome. Great information. So we have a question from Kelly Glasgow. So her question is around what kind of training will the new police have, and will there be new types of training now? And then it's two-part. Her second part is this part here. Also, how often do police officers take professional development training once they start?
Well, it's a good question. Both of those are great questions. The first question is, what kind of training are we going to be changing? I think is the general gist of it. And the problem that I have with current police training, first off, is it's not very long. They get, 6-8 months, and they're on the force with a gun and a badge. They're never really trained thoroughly in what the laws are, which is why you have so many deputies that have no idea whether someone's breaking the law. They're just going to arrest them anyway, which goes back to Mr. Haji's question about, are you going to stop this? We'll tell it to the judge. They don't know what they're doing. I have a video on my channel where 8 officers are surrounding me, Pinellas County deputies, threatening to arrest me for 3 or 4 different things when I've never violated any law. So this all has to stop. They need to be trained in the law. 80% of their training is for how to hurt or kill people. I think that's ridiculous. Why do we need to have such trained killers being put out into what is basically a peaceful society? My position is when you're trained to be a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And that's exactly what's happening with the police industry. Now, some of these guys I'm not going to be able to untrain. That's where we're going to get to the 30% of the officers that we're going to get rid of. Some of them will be able to be trained. But I'm hoping to take a little bit of a different tact in that regard. When I'm sheriff, I'm going to be dismantling the military hierarchy within the sheriff's office. And I think that that's a major part of the problem. You have lieutenants and corporals and sergeants. And when you start training and thinking that you're part of a military command, then you need an enemy. And when you have an enemy, that only enemy that exists here is us, the people. And so there are not going to be any more stripes, and there's not going to be any designations. I'm going to have supervisors and managers and deputy associates and things along those lines. We're going to get rid of the military hierarchy. And okay. I'm also going to be bringing in a lot of civilians into the police agency here. Civilians to do mental health checks, to civilians to handle those types of calls, civilians that are trained in drug abuse and drug interdiction. And those people are going to go on the calls instead of armed deputies who are, again, the hammer who's just going to pound people into the ground and arrest them. So I'm going to take back a lot of the people, the boots that we have on the ground, and I'm going to put regular shoes on the ground. And hopefully these people are going to be better equipped to handle the circumstances that they come in. Now, part of that is also going to require me to revamp the 911 system. Our current 911 system funnels everything to the hammers. And that just has to stop. Galtieri has a couple of token officers that he says are community mental health wellness officers and all of that. But you know what? They're still officers with the hammer. They're still trained to be the hammer. And I want to get completely away from that. Now, obviously, if these mental health professionals go out and it's a situation that they can't handle themselves or it starts to get a little out of hand, sure, they can retreat, back off, call the officers in. And if something more dire needs to happen, it can. But we shouldn't have the violence as the first alternative. We shouldn't have the force as the first alternative. So instead of training the officers to do that, I'm going to be bringing in civilians that are going to be working in that capacity instead of the officers.
Okay, great. Again, well prepared and love the answer. All right. So the next question that we have from the audience is also a two-part question. It is from Tatishka Thomas. So are you against employee rights? And then she goes on to ask, how do you plan on getting rid of the police union?
Okay, I'm not sure about what you mean by employees' rights. I do believe that employees should have the right to collectively bargain, if that's what you're asking me. The unions that they have here go well beyond the collective bargaining just to make sure that the officers aren't being taken advantage of. We have massive pension fraud here going on in the county because of the unions. We have a high percentage of bad officers because of the unions. And I'm not going to get rid of the union, but if I'm the guy that signs that union contract and I'm the guy that agrees to that union contract, it's going to have at least half the stuff that's in there removed. And I don't really give a damn what the police union says about that. Because I'm not one of them. I'm not beholden to them. And we're taking this stuff out. And if they don't like it, then I'll just work with non-union officers. I'm sure there's a lot of officers all across the country that would love to come work at an agency where every single officer is one of the good guys. And that's what I'm trying to set up here.
Okay, so it's not that you're necessarily against the police union at all.
No, I think officers should be treated fairly. I think that they should be protected. I think that they should be taken care of. I think if they go out and do a tough job and they do the job right, then we should stand behind them. And we should do everything we can to make sure that they're safe and they're protected. And that's common sense. And I will do that to the good officers that we wind up remaining with. But I don't need the union to tell me to do that. If I get rid of a third of these officers and I have the other 2/3 that are really doing a great job and they're solving those crimes and they're not victimizing the people of Pinellas County, there's going to be more money around to go to help them out, to give them raises because we got rid of the third that we didn't need, the bad third.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you for that answer. Our next question is from Leslie and Bill McAllister. The question is, how will you be addressing our daughter, Taylor McAllister's homicide that the sheriff's department should have handled? Are you familiar with this story?
Yes, I am. And Mr. McAllister, I think you know that I've bumped into you out on the internet a couple times, and I've seen you posting these things, and I have specifically posted under those headings and those posts that you put out there that as sheriff, I am going to reopening that case and I'm going to investigate that and bring it to an arrest conclusion. And the way I'm looking at it, probably 2, 3, maybe 4 arrests for that case. Now, I may not be able to get a conviction if it goes through the courts, but by God, there's going to be some arrests in that case. And I've got approximately 9, maybe 12 cases similar to yours where murders have occurred here in Pinellas County and the investigations have been horribly botched by the Pinellas County Sheriff's Department and other local police agencies. And I'm going to be opening all of those and arresting them and bringing them to an arrest conclusion.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you for that answer. The next question that we have is from Corey Holmes, and it says, I saw the Al Sharpton video. Did you find that video to be racist by the sitting sheriff? So before you answer it, can you give us a synopsis of what that video was and then let us know what you thought about it?
Yeah, the basic video he's talking about is that after the Galtieri refused to arrest Michael Draka for the murder of Marquise McLaughlin, he gave a press conference and he said that Draka didn't do anything wrong. And of course, that enraged a lot of people, including Al Sharpton. Al Sharpton came down here and he went to the Primitive Baptist Church and he had a rally there. And I was there at that rally and I listened to what everybody was saying down there. And the bottom line was when Sharpton said, you know, either arrest this man or give up your badge. And so then the news reporters went back out to Galtieri and Galtieri said, I don't care what he says. Al Sharpton, you just tell Al Sharpton to just mind his own business and go back to New York. And that literally mimicked the same comments that deputies from the 60s, Selma, Alabama, Bull Connor used to say, and get out of here, Martin Luther King, you're nothing but troublemakers. And so in a video I created, I have Galtieri saying that, and then I have these racist sheriffs from the 60s saying the exact same thing. And then I have Al Sharpton making the same comment. So do I think that what Sheriff Galtieri said was racism? Absolutely, positively. I think he's one of the worst racist sheriffs that we have here in the country. And when he says things like he's not even going to bother to investigate the 3 girls that his deputies drowned in a pond because he says his deputies didn't do anything wrong. And in a press conference, he actually said those girls had no business being up in Clearwater. Oh, really? In that same press conference, he talked about how all the problems that we have with auto thefts and all the felonies are all the responsibility of the Black youth of South St. Pete. And he literally vilified an entire community. And to me, that was despicable. And what's even worse than that, in my opinion, is how a racist sheriff like Robert Galtieri is not only still allowed to be a sheriff here, but he was named Sheriff of the Year in 2019 by the National Sheriff's Association. And he's the president of the Florida Sheriff's Association. So this racist man that has done so many racist things, like not arrest Dredka, like not investigate the drowning of these girls, like making the statements that he's made. He's allowed to hold these positions and be the face of the Florida Sheriff's Association and be the Sheriff of the Year of the National Sheriff's Association. And I think everybody that's listening to this message needs to call the National Sheriff's Association and the Florida Sheriff's Association and say, what the hell do you think you're doing allowing a man like this to represent all the deputies of the country and all the deputies of the state?
Okay. Absolutely.
I
believe it answered the question. And like I said, when I opened this up, I'm here to learn too. So I figured while I'm learning about who I'm going to vote for or in the reasons why I should vote for the candidates in 2020, I should share that knowledge. So this is all about knowledge transfer. So I'm learning a lot here as well.
Oh,
so thank you.
You know you're voting for me. You know it.
So thank you. I really appreciate the detail that you're giving. I'm learning a lot here, and I'm going to share some of the knowledge that I've learned today. So I do have another question. There's a lot of questions coming in. You just touched on this, but how will you handle Officer Howard Skaggs, who has been drowned Black kids for years and still employed? Maybe you didn't touch on this, but could you tell us a little bit about the situation and what you think?
Yeah, Howard Skaggs is one of the 8 murder investigations I'm going to be opening, and I'm going to bring it to the conclusion of arrest, and that arrest is going to be Howard Skaggs. Howard Skaggs has a position where he's the president or head of the Wolf Pack, the DUI Wolf Pack. So basically, he and his crew drive around all night in their cars. If you're out late at night, you're probably going to run into the Wolf Pack, especially if you're a minority. And in his position, what he does is he'll have a car chase, and the sheriff has a policy of ending car chases if it's not a felony or something serious. And so they end the car chase, but then Howard Skaggs and his wolf pack would then continue the chase, even though they're told not to. And in 2002, Howard Skaggs was in that exact same situation, and he was chasing an 18-year-old Black male named Laboriel Felton. And he and a deputy named James Vickers chased Laboriel Felton into another pond, went into the pond and beat him unconscious and drowned him to death, and then made jokes in their police report about how the victim was doing the backstroke with the last time they saw him. And if you saw pictures of the pond, which I have, you couldn't have swam in that at all because it's covered with vines and leaves and sticks. It was nonsense. They were literally making a joke about killing this man. Now, if that's not bad enough, the same deputy that chased the 3 Black girls into that pond in the cemetery was Howard Skaggs. And he was doing the exact same thing he did to Laboriel Felton. And so I have this question for Sheriff Galtieri that I'd like him to answer. And that question is, how many Black teenagers does a Pinellas County Sheriff's deputy have to drown in a pond before they get into trouble? Because right now, all I know is it's at least 4, more than 4, because he's drowned 4 Black teens, 3 of them girls, 15 and 16 years old. And Laboriel Felton was 18 years old. That's 4, just this one deputy alone. And he's not only allowed to still be a deputy, they didn't even bother investigating the 3 girls drowning. Galtieri just came flat out and said he didn't do anything wrong. And I've examined that case thoroughly, and he did a lot wrong. And that's why when I'm sheriff, I'm reopening it, and Howard Skaggs is going to jail. I'm coming for you, Howie.
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah. Well, thank you for teaching me a little bit more about who Howard Skaggs is. I'm going to do a little bit more research on my own as well. Again, we have a lot of questions coming in, and you were well prepared on that. And I want to learn more about the 8 murder investigations that you definitely want to interview at another time as well.
Can I just say something here?
Absolutely. Feel free to speak.
I watched your video interview of Mr. Santana the other day, and it angered me to no end. And the reason that it angered me was because you had asked him, or a listener actually had asked him about what would he have done differently with Marquise McLaughlin. Yes. And Mr. Santana just sat there with this weird look on his face, and then he started rambling on about God knows what. And then finally, he admitted that he had no idea who Marquise McLaughlin was. And part of the problem that we have here in Pinellas County is we have a deputy police agency. They don't care who they kill. They don't even remember who they are. And Mr. Santana was a part of that culture for 31 years. And he admitted that it was a racist culture. And for the 31 years, he did nothing about it. And now he sits there and he says that he lives in that same neighborhood. He goes to that exact same store where Marquise McLaughlin was killed. He literally has to stand on the spot where he died to pay for what he buys from that store. And he can't even remember Marquise McLaughlin's name. And he wants to be the one that's supposed to represent the minority communities here in Pinellas County and change the sheriff's department when he didn't file a single complaint the 31 years he was there. I'm sorry, I just found it personally offensive that he would not even know who Marquise McLaughlin was.
Yeah, the Marquise McLaughlin murder was a horrific event that sent shockwaves throughout the nation, and definitely I heard his name in my sleep for quite some time afterwards as my son leaves this house. Every time my son leaves this house, I do have a question based off of what you said, and I did ask that question as a follow-up to Mr. Santana the other day, is around the stand your ground law. How do you feel that you can make an impact and you can handle some of these atrocious things that are happening, like with Marquise McLaughlin, like with Trayvon Martin, and around the stand your ground law?
I think that the concept of stand your ground, that you should be able to defend yourself, that you're not required to run and hide if somebody's attacking you, is valid. The problem that I have with it is when you have it administered by a racist sheriff like Galtieri, who thinks that the white people that shoot black people don't have to be arrested, but the black people that shoot white people do. And when you have it being administered improperly and into that horrific degree, I mean, Sheriff Galtieri actually gave a press conference where he said he cannot arrest Michael Draka because Michael Draka didn't commit a crime. He literally said that. But yet here he was convicted and he's now sentenced to 20 years. So obviously he did commit a crime. But now Galtieri just says he's not going to comment on that anymore. Like he can get away with that. Like it's over. No, it's not over, Mr. Galtieri. It's just starting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for that. We do have another question. I think that you kind of gave us your thoughts around the war on drugs from the view of marijuana and stopping this enforcement around marijuana that is just giving people, or the police department, the sheriff's department, a reason to pull people over, arrest them, etc., unnecessarily. But what are your thoughts on the war on drugs?
The war on drugs ends with me. Okay. And there's so many things that are involved in that. And I've got a lot of really good answers to this, but I don't want to take up another hour of your show. But basically, handcuffs have never cured addiction. They never have, and they never will. And it's asinine for us to actually think that they do. In fact, Galtieri himself, I have press release clips of him specifically saying, arresting these people for drugs isn't doing any good. So then my next question to him is, and why the hell do you spend $100 million a year doing it? Why aren't you reallocating that to drug treatment through the Pinellas County Sheriff's Department? I think the Pinellas County Sheriff's Department should have needle exchanges. I think anybody that has a drug problem should be able to come to the Pinellas County Sheriff's Department and say, I have this problem, help me. And instead of throwing them up against the wall and arresting them, we should actually help them, you know? What a strange concept that would be, right? But as sheriff, I'm going to end all arrests for personal use drugs. That doesn't work. Like Galtieri said, like I said, like the whole world says, that's a waste of everyone's time. And all it does is criminalize people that have an addiction. I'm going to end all the arrests for things like paraphernalia. I'm sorry, you have a glass pipe in your purse, so what? And of course, we're going to end all the arrests and all the searches for cannabis. I'm going to get rid of all the cannabis dogs and the attack dogs as well. I don't think we should be training dogs that attack people and chew them up. I'm going to be bringing in beagles and they can still track the people, but when they catch up to them, they'll just lick them to death instead of chew them to death.
Oh,
so
okay.
there's so many things that we can do in just that regard in this supposed war on drugs, and we're wasting all of our money just criminalizing people, and that absolutely ends with me. My cannabis plan for Pinellas County will not only end all of those arrests and the persecution of mostly minorities, because Sheriff Galtieri arrests Black people for 6 times higher the rate for drugs than he does white people. But interestingly enough, every study you look at says that Blacks and whites use drugs approximately at the same level, about 10% of their communities. So how is that possible? In the 2016 election, Galtieri was specifically asked, why do you have 6 times the amount for Blacks than you do whites? And he said, oh, I'm not sure. I didn't know that. I'm gonna have to look into that. He was just asked that recently in the last debate, and he said the same thing. Oh, I'm not sure. I'll have to look into that. Well, why didn't you look into it 4 years ago? It's just, he doesn't care. He just wants to arrest the people. All of that ends with me. The people in Pinellas County are no longer going to be victimized based on their addictions. They're going to be helped. They're going to be assisted, and we're going to give them the help that they need so they can become productive members of our society again.
Wow. Very, very prepared. Thank you. Thank you for that answer. We have, and I hope you don't mind if we continue, some of these questions are very relevant, real, and important. So we have a question from Victoria Armstrong. She wants to know, how will you help the homeless in our community? And that's a very real problem, a challenge that we have.
Well, currently, Sheriff Galtieri just arrests them. That's what he does. He just goes around and arrests them. He has the St. Pete police arrest them. He has the Clearwater police arrest them. They just all throw them in jail, or they throw them in Safe Harbor. I don't know whether you've been to Safe Harbor. I've been there. It actually is just a jail. They don't call it a jail. It's on the jail premises. It's got barbed wire around it. They're bossed around by the deputies. The deputies that are out there are just as abusive as the jail guards in the jail are. So this is no solution for what they're doing. I actually intend on taking some of that $100 million that we're going to be saving on drug enforcement, pot enforcement, and I'm going to take some of the land that we have here in Pinellas County that's vacant. The county owns acres upon acres of abandoned land that's not really being used for anything, and it would be very cost effective to just level the land out, put a few pads out, and build tiny homes. And I think that I can get people like Lowe's and Home Depot to donate the materials. And what I'd like to do is start something that begins in the jail, where we train people that are inmates to do carpentry, to do electrical repair, to do welding, to do all these little hands-on trades that actually make good money. And if these people want to come out of jail and they want someplace to live, if they'll come to our tiny home village, and if they'll help me build 9 of these tiny homes, the 10th one will be theirs. And
wow.
If they actually help in the construction, then they're going to take the pride of ownership. So if the guy 3 doors down is writing graffiti on the side of the one that he helped build, I'm hoping he's going to go down there and say, hey, knock it off. And I'd like to see these little communities develop their own separate government. Inside the center, I'd like there to be a computer where they can access going online and filling out job applications and printing things. A small business center. And this has actually worked in other parts of the world and in other parts of this country. And I don't think that the money that we spend arresting homeless people and throwing them in a jail at $125 a day is doing anything for anybody. Sheriff Galtieri has 316 inmates in the jail that have HIV, and he has to spend $1,600 a week on their medications. And if you add that to the $125 a day he spends just to keep them in the jail, he's spending over $125,000 a year housing these people. I mean, we could send them to Harvard with an apartment and a car for that. So why are they in jail? So I'd like to see these resources spent building things like these tiny home communities and showing these people that we do care about them and there is a way out, and offering them the actual way out.
Right. Truly try to focus on transformation, not just on holding them and jailing them and keeping them.
Exactly. Well, I don't know whether you know this or not, but the largest employer here in Pinellas County is the Pinellas County government. The second largest employer is the Pinellas County punishment machine, the sheriff's office. And here you have all these homeless people around and all these homeless people coming out of jail. Guess how many of them the sheriff's office or the county hires? 0. Why isn't the largest employer helping the homeless community by actually offering some of these people jobs? We can't find something for them to do. I mean, you have the ridiculous amount of money that we're wasting on all this crap around here. If you go around, you see those big circles that they're putting in the middle of neighborhood intersections. Each one of those is $250,000. You've got a $170,000 sculpture and a $350,000 sculpture out front of the St. Pete Police Department. Why are we spending money on that when we could do something even more important for the community by actually helping these people? And I plan on taking everything that we do at the Pinellas County Sheriff's Department and starting to focus it back towards helping the community, actually serving the public. Serve and protect is where I think we should go, and I think I can get there.
Sorry about that, guys. You know how it is, technology. My internet connection is not as friendly as I like, so I'm not sure what I missed, but I definitely.
I was still talking the whole time you were gone. I took over, so it's okay.
I don't have to worry about you. You can interview anyone. This is such a. Yep. I just give you. Let me just click back off and just put goodbye. So no, you're doing an amazing job. So thank you for. I mean, I think that is an amazing idea. I don't know if anyone heard what I was saying around that, but a lot of times when I think about the homeless and how they're put into jail, it's and not even just the homeless. I think about people that have drug addiction problems or just problems in general. It doesn't feel like jail is the place to go to help them. It's just a place to go to contain them and keep them away from everyone else. In some instances, I agree. There's heinous crimes where they just need to be separated. That's just my personal opinion. But what you've said here resonates with me. And I think it's a great idea. I would love to see it implemented. This could be game changing overall. So thank you very much for that. I'm going to ask you a couple of more questions, and then we're going to have to close out because we're nearing an hour. I can't believe that we are near that hour, but I want to close out and give some call to actions for everyone, which is around voting. But you talked about the number of people that have HIV in Pinellas County jails right now. So we have a question, another question from Victoria Armstrong around what will you do to improve the conditions of the Pinellas County jail? Now, first, just let us know, what do you think those conditions are? Are they horrible? And if so, what would you do to improve them?
Well, since I've been running for sheriff, I've had a lot of people call me and tell me about the horror conditions that they've had in the jail, the abuses that they've had, how the deputies know where the cameras aren't facing. And, oh, by the way, it was Mr. Santana who put the cameras in there and left those little blank spots in the jail. And so you have these situations where people are getting their arms broken, women are getting beaten up, they're getting abused constantly in the jail. And that happens because of the culture that's within the jail. We're so much better than you. And I think that if you look at the jail populations in a lot of the European countries, they don't treat them like that. They treat them like human beings that made a bad choice, and that they just have to share the time together, the inmates as well as the people that are working there, and they work to improving their lives. And we can do that here too. But the first way to improve the Pinellas County Jail is not put 70% of the people that are in there now in there. Stop the arrest for the nonsense. It doesn't have to be filled to the rafters every day like Sheriff Galtieri does. If we had approximately 25% of the inmates in the Pinellas County Jail that we have now, we could easily handle that amount of inmates. We could provide them with actual services. We could provide them with good medical care, and we could take better care of these people that made a mistake and hopefully get them to understand that this isn't the end for them, that this is just a little bad stepping stone, but we can actually assist them in coming out of this and integrating themselves back into the community by helping them do it, not making things worse for them.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay. Great answer. All right, I'm going to take two more questions, and then we're going to have to close out. Second to last question. This comes from a Corey Holmes. His question is, if you're elected, what are your plans to diversify your administration to represent our community it serves? You talked a little bit about hiring some actual, residents and bringing them into some of the jobs that are there. But tell us a little bit more about the question that we have here.
Well, I don't know whether people know this or not, but in 1988, the Pinellas County government and the sheriff's office was sued by the Department of Justice. And the reason that they were sued is because their hiring policies were so ridiculously racist that people were filing complaints with the federal government. In fact, that 1988 consent decree was exactly how Alicio Santana got hired. And you heard his statements about what happened when he showed up his first day. We don't want you here. We don't like you here. We never wanted to hire you. We were forced to hire you. And then they treated him poorly the whole time he was there for 31 years. So they fell under this Department of Justice consent decree since 1988. And basically all that decree said was they had to stop their racist hiring practices. They had to stop their racist training and bring the number of deputies and the number of employees at the sheriff's office equal to what's in the community.
Okay. The percentage rates, right?
Pardon?
The percentage rates. Get the percentage.
Yes.
Okay.
I think African Americans here are about 10%. Hispanics are about 6 or 7%, depending on what you look at. But So that means that we should have at least 10% African American at the sheriff's department. We should have at least 6% Hispanic at the sheriff's department. They've been able to integrate the proper levels for women, but they haven't been able to do it for minorities. And so that consent decree in 1988 has never, ever been fulfilled. Here we are in 2020, and they still haven't followed the consent decree from 1988. And in 2016, the sheriff's department actually filed a motion with the Department of Justice in the federal court to get the consent decree stopped. And I actually filed an amicus brief showing the Department of Justice all of the horrible racism that's currently going on in the sheriff's department. And I showed them that since Sheriff Galtieri became sheriff, the number of minorities working at the sheriff's department actually went down instead of up under his leadership. And I was able to get them to not end the consent decree, and we're still under it today. So the problem that we have isn't necessarily that there aren't good applicants. There aren't people that do want to work here. The problem is we still have an administrative agency that's run by racists like Sheriff Galtieri that doesn't care what the Department of Justice says. He wants them to just go back to New York or Washington and mind their own business too. And he's not going to make any changes as long as he's there. But I see nothing wrong with integrating our agency to reflect the community. In fact, I'd like to have transgender police officers here in Pinellas County. I'd like to have gay police officers here in Pinellas County. I'd like to have our police force literally represent the community so the community can see themselves in the faces of the officers that they're interacting with. And I hope that that will help everybody become more comfortable, more trusting, and more helpful to each other.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Amazing answer. So our last question will come from Monty Boucher. I hope I pronounced that correctly. And it's around the young people, near and dear to our hearts, our future. How will you help the young kids keep them out of trouble? What are your thoughts around that?
Oh my gosh, this is the hard one. And this is the hardest one.
It's hard.
Yeah. The question isn't hard. The answer is hard. And the problem with the youth in this area, they don't have much that they're offered. There's no place where they can really get a job. There's no place where they can work and make enough money to do anything. And so if they look at making, $20, $30, $40 in a week, they're not going to bother doing that. They're going to find other things to amuse themselves with their time. And that's where they wind up getting in trouble. There are no options. They don't see a way to get out of the situation that they're in. And how we do that, how we provide that to them, I really don't know all the answers to that, but I do know one key issue, one thing that would help, and that is that we don't treat them like criminals as police officers every time we see them on the streets. And we don't just assume that if there's three young men sitting on a corner that they must be up to no good and the car's going to screech up and throw them against the car. Because you treat the minorities in this community that way every time you interact with them, every time you see them, and all that's going to cause is hate and distrust for the police department and hate and distrust for the government. And that is where I think we're making our biggest mistake. So I'd like to start by ending the harassment of the youth by the Pinellas County Sheriff's Department and any other police agency that's working in this area. As sheriff, if the St. Pete Police Department is harassing people or abusing them or causing use of force problems, or the Clearwater Police Department is, I have the authority to go arrest those officers, and I will do my own investigation. So when I say I'm going to end police abuse here in Pinellas County, I'm talking all four corners of the county, and I'm talking at every single police agency. So if people here in Pinellas County have a problem with an officer, they don't have to worry about that department's internal affairs department doing anything about it anymore. They can bring it to me, and we will investigate it, and I will hold their officers accountable, even if they're unwilling to.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Awesome. Great answer. And it's a lot of work to be done there. And I see Victoria Armstrong, she mentioned no more school to prison pipeline. It sounds like, that's something that is just happening in general due to some of the things that you just talked about. And I know that there's a lot of community committees and nonprofits that would love to work with you to keep kids out of trouble. Kimberly Brown just brought up this comment here. The CULC wants to help start a job program for the youth. So would you be open to working with some of those types of programs?
Absolutely. Yes. We've got this great big sheriff's office down there, and it has a lot of empty rooms that they're not using. Let me put a name on the door and we'll bring kids there. I don't want the kids to be afraid of the police department. I want them to come down and hang out. They're like these cops that chase all the kids in their hot rod cars around. You see that all over the city. The kids all pull into a shopping center. They just want to hang out. The police race in and chase them all away. They screech off, and it's dangerous. come down to the Pinellas County Sheriff's Department. We got a great big parking lot out front. Have your car show right in front of the Pinellas County Sheriff's Department. We'll have officers that'll come out and hang out with you. Just drive safe.
And nothing crazy is going to go down, and you don't have anything to worry about, right? So, and it's a great, and you're letting them do what they want to do. Mm-hmm.
There's so much that can be done to bridge the gaps that we're having here in the community. And when you have an iron-fisted tyrant like Sheriff Galtieri that just wants to put people in jail, you can't bridge anything with that.
Yeah. Well, you know what? We've been talking and learning and unpacking a little bit about you, Mr. McLynas, for about an hour now. I'm so very appreciative of the knowledge transfer that you've given to me and the audience today. What I'd like to do is have a call to action. The call to action is vote. What many may not know is that there is a primary that you are running in August. So if you don't have your mail-in ballots, if you don't know, you need to go out and vote in August. It's not very far away. And Mr. McLynas, I want to give you an opportunity to give any closing thoughts that you may have, any call to actions, contact information that you may have. Please go out, please provide that information with us now.
Yeah, I'd like people of Pinellas County to know that for the first time, they have a choice to literally elect somebody from outside the police industry that will go in and make these changes. You see these protesters down there every day yelling and screaming at the police. The police are not going to do anything about that. But yet here you have somebody like myself who can be elected into the sheriff's office and can implement all of these reforms right now, this November, at this election. They can be yours, including cannabis freedom, including ending the use of force problems, including ending the arrest and policing for profit. All of these things literally can end with me. And all I need is the community support. I need you to go to my website, McLynasforSheriff.com, donate to my campaign so that I can.
And that's a 4.
No, it's a FOR. That's the
FOR.
email's for.
FOR.
Yeah, so it's McLynasFORSheriff.com. And there's a donation link there. Donate as much as you possibly can so that I can get my word out to the people of Pinellas so we can make all of this a reality. And all it's going to take is the community to support me, and all of this will be done when I'm in office.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Please go to Mr. McLynas's page, or you can even inbox me and I can direct you, or comment here. We'll be going back and checking for any questions. If you have any questions, or if you'd like to reach out to James McLynas. I appreciate your time. I'm very thankful for the knowledge transfer that you've given to us, and I look forward to hearing more from you. And I appreciate you all for your engagement in that live audience. And the more you know, the more you grow. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Monique.
Bye-bye.